He made America laugh like no one else. But what if the man behind the smile was hiding something no one was meant to see? Red Skelton built a career playing lovable characters: the goofy drunk, the innocent kid, the gentle clown. On the surface, he was pure joy. But behind closed doors, even his own crew whispered about a different side of him, something they called the Red Skelton Dirty Hour. And that wasn't the only secret. A heartbreaking family tragedy would change him forever. And years later, a shocking detail in his will raised even more questions about the life he left behind. So who was he really? The man who made millions laugh, or someone living a story far darker than anyone imagined? Keep watching to find out. Red Skelton, the boy who turned struggle into laughter. Long before Red Skelton became the man who made millions laugh, his story began with hardship. Born Richard Skelton on July 18, 1913, in Indiana, he was the youngest of 4 children, and the only one with bright red hair, a trait that would later define his identity. But he never even met his father, a circus performer who died just 2 months before he was born. Without him, the family struggled through war years and the edge of the Great Depression. As a child, Red did whatever he could to help. He worked as a newsboy, even lying about his age just to earn a few cents. One day, while selling papers outside a theater, his life changed forever. Comedian Ed Wynn noticed him, bought all his newspapers, and took him backstage, introducing him to performers. That moment lit a spark Red would follow for the rest of his life. By his teenage years, he was already on the road, performing wherever he could and sending money back home. Entertainment wasn't just a dream, it was survival. Like his father, who had been a circus clown, Red discovered he had a natural gift for making people laugh. In fact, he even performed with the same Hagenbeck-Wallace circus his father once worked for. He later found work on a traveling showboat, the Cotton Blossom, drifting along the Ohio and Missouri rivers. It was a unique chapter, but Red sensed the industry wouldn't last. And he was right. So he kept moving, adapting, chasing opportunity. In the 1930s, he began hosting dance marathons, and during one of those events in Kansas City, he met Edna Stillwell, the woman who would change his career. She bluntly told him his jokes weren't funny and insisted she could do better. Surprisingly, Red believed her. Edna became not just his wife, but his manager and main writer, helping shape the comedic voice that would one day make him a legend. Love, laughter, and the rise of a star. Red Skelton was still a teenager when his life took a serious turn. Just a month before turning 18, he married Edna Stillwell, who was only 16 at the time. Despite their young age, Edna quickly proved to be a powerful force in his life. She wasn't just his wife, she became his manager, his critic, and the driving mind behind much of his early success. She negotiated his salaries, pushed for better opportunities, and wasn't afraid to tell him when something wasn't working. Their marriage lasted 13 years, and although it eventually ended, it didn't fall apart in bitterness. In fact, they remained remarkably close. Edna continued writing for him even after the divorce, and the two maintained a unique partnership. As Red once joked, revisiting their wedding memories with humor, their bond had simply evolved rather than disappeared. By the late 1930s, Red had already worked his way through circus acts, vaudeville, and burlesque, but his real breakthrough came in 1937 when he appeared on The Rudy Vallee Show. That moment opened the door to both radio and film. Soon, he was appearing in movies like Having Wonderful Time, 1938, and over the next 2 decades, he would go on to star in more than 30 MGM films. Still, it was radio that truly made him a star. His voice, timing, and imagination brought characters to life in a way audiences had never heard before. His clean, family-friendly humor even caught the attention of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who invited him to perform at his birthday celebration in 1940. That moment cemented Red's reputation as the king of clean comedy. In 1941, he launched his own program, the Raleigh Cigarette Program, where he introduced unforgettable characters like Junior the Mean Whittle Kid. These personalities became the heart of his success and helped him connect deeply with audiences across America. But comedy wasn't his only talent. Red was also a gifted artist. He began painting as a way to visualize his routines, and by the 1960s, his artwork was being displayed and sold, revealing a quieter, more reflective side of him. Even as his career soared, personal changes followed. His divorce from Edna marked the end of their marriage, but not their partnership. They even left the courthouse together, arm in arm. Edna continued managing his career, securing major deals like a 7-year Hollywood contract in 1951. Fame, pressure, and a father's heartbreak. By the mid-1940s, Red Skelton was already rising fast, but life had other plans. In 1944, with his first marriage behind him, he was drafted into the military. Despite efforts from his team to secure a deferment, he was inducted as a private on June 7th. Assigned to special services, Red spent his time entertaining troops, bringing laughter to soldiers during one of the darkest periods in history. But behind the scenes, the constant pressure took a toll. Exhaustion caught up with him, and he was eventually hospitalized before being discharged in 1945. During this time, his personal life shifted again. While on furlough, he met Georgia Davis, and the two married in March 1945. Together, they built a family, welcoming their daughter Valentina in 1947 and their son Richard in 1948. Soon after returning home, Red stepped into what would become the defining chapter of his career. He took the beloved characters he had created on radio and brought them to television. In 1951, the Red Skelton Hour premiered on NBC, and it was an instant success. Within a year, he won Emmy Awards for Best Comedy Show and Best Comedian, later adding another for writing in 1961. By the late 1950s, he stood alone as the only comedian with his own weekly variety show. But behind the laughter, cracks were forming. The pressure to constantly perform weighed heavily on him. Long hours, physical strain, and personal struggles began to build. He turned to alcohol, trying to cope with both the demands of fame and growing issues in his marriage. Then, in 1953, the show faced cancellation when ratings dipped and its sponsor pulled out. Fortunately, CBS picked it up, and the program continued successfully until 1970. But the stress never truly left him. The loss that changed him forever. In May 1958, Red Skelton faced the most painful moment of his life, the loss of his young son, Richard. After a long battle with leukemia, Richard passed away on May 10th at UCLA Medical Center, just days before his 10th birthday. Red stayed by his son's side until the very end. In those final days, he tried to bring comfort in the only way he knew how, as a father, not a performer. He had once asked Richard if he wanted a birthday party. The boy quietly said no, just a few friends. Wanting to give him something special, Red brought a Sears catalog to the hospital and told him he could choose anything he wanted. Richard picked simple things, a tent, some camping gear, and a red blanket. But even in his final moments, Richard wasn't thinking about himself. With an IV in his leg and his body weakened from countless transfusions, he turned to his father and softly asked, "Daddy, will you get Mama that red blanket for Mother's Day? I don't suppose they'd let me out of here with this cut on my leg." It was a heartbreaking mix of innocence and awareness. He knew he wasn't going home. Not long after, his condition worsened. "I can't see. Everything is fuzzy," he said. Within an hour, he was gone. Richard, born May 20th, 1948, had even appeared on the Red Skelton Hour, sharing a small piece of his father's world. He was laid to rest at Forest Lawn, and in a cruel twist, Red was scheduled to perform his weekly television show the very day his son was buried. The loss shattered him. Years later, the reminders remained. Richard's beloved model trains were carefully stored away in their Bel Air home. Red refused to throw them out, unable to let go of those memories. Eventually, the family moved to Palm Springs, leaving the house behind, though Red still returned there for work. For a man who made millions laugh, this was the grief he carried quietly, a pain that never truly faded. Red Skelton, the final years, legacy, and last laughs. After the devastating loss of his son, Red Skelton returned to the stage, but those closest to him knew something had changed. The laughter was still there, the performances still brilliant, but the man behind them carried a quiet weight that never truly lifted. In 1969, he delivered one of the most powerful moments of his career. Standing before his audience, he performed his now famous monologue about the Pledge of Allegiance. What began as a simple explanation turned into something deeply moving, so impactful that it was later released as a record by Columbia. The performance reached all the way to the White House, where Red was invited to present it for President Richard Nixon. It was a reminder that his voice still mattered, not just in comedy but in American culture. But just as he reached another high point, everything shifted again. In 1970, CBS made the unexpected decision to cancel the Red Skelton Hour, aiming to attract a younger audience. Red was stunned. Years later, he would joke about it during an award speech, saying, "I want to thank you for sitting back down. I thought you were pulling a CBS and walking out on me again." The humor was there, but so was the sting. His personal life saw more changes. In 1971, he and Georgia divorced, closing another chapter. 2 years later, he found stability again, marrying Lothian Toland, who would remain by his side for the rest of his life. But tragedy struck once more in 1976, on the anniversary of their son Richard's death, when Georgia died by suicide at just 54. The loss deeply affected Red, and he mourned her quietly for months. Still, he kept going. Red continued performing live shows well into his later years, staying on stage until 1993, when he was 80 years old. In the mid-1970s, Red Skelton briefly considered a return to the big screen when Neil Simon's hit comedy The Sunshine Boys was being adapted into a film. It had been years since his last major movie role, and the opportunity seemed promising. He even completed a screen test alongside Jack Benny, impressing Simon enough to reconsider his original casting plans. But in the end, Skelton turned down the role, reportedly due to financial disagreements. With Benny's declining health also affecting production, the parts eventually went to George Burns and Walter Matthau. Though he stepped away from major film roles, Skelton never truly left entertainment. In 1981, he created several television specials for HBO, including Freddie the Freeloader's Christmas Dinner and the Funny Faces series. A few years later, in 1984, he delivered a Royal Command performance for the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, which was later broadcast in the United States. Even in his later years, he continued sharing his voice and reflections, including in one of his final interviews that would later appear in a PBS special. Red Skelton passed away on September 17, 1997, at the age of 84 due to pneumonia. He was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, in a private family mausoleum alongside his beloved son Richard and his second wife, Georgia. Even in rest, he remained close to the two people who had shaped so much of his life, legacy and tributes. Red Skelton always saw himself differently from other entertainers. While many called him a comedian, he preferred a simpler, more meaningful title, a clown. To him, there was a difference. A comedian delivered jokes, but a clown could make people laugh one moment and move them the next. As he once explained, a clown could reach people on a deeper level, showing them both the humor and the heart of life. "I just want to be known as a clown," he said, believing it was the highest form of his craft. For Red, making people laugh wasn't just a job, it was his purpose. Others in the industry saw that same uniqueness. Groucho Marx praised him as one of the most underrated performers in show business and even compared him to Charlie Chaplin. What made Red stand out was his ability to transform into completely different characters with almost nothing, sometimes just a simple hat. Without elaborate costumes or heavy dialogue, he could become anyone: a mischievous child, a grumpy old woman, or a stumbling drunk. And just as easily, he could shift into something deeply emotional, proving he was as strong in drama as he was in comedy. That respect extended across generations. Legendary ventriloquist Edgar Bergen once said, "Red was among the last of a rare breed of true entertainers, those who valued quality over quantity." Even Hollywood executives admired him for his timeless style, noting that he didn't rely on punchlines because his performances came straight from the heart. His friendship with Marcel Marceau also reflected that artistry. The two shared a deep appreciation for silent performance and appeared together multiple times. After Red's passing, Marceau described him as eternal, a performer who made millions both laugh and cry. When Red Skelton died, tributes poured in, celebrating him as a complete entertainer, a storyteller, a mime, a singer, and above all, a clown who connected with audiences of all ages. Today, his legacy lives on far beyond television. In his hometown of Vincennes, Indiana, the Red Skelton Performing Arts Center and the Red Skelton Museum of American Comedy honor his life and work. Every year, the town even hosts a festival in his name, complete with a parade of 1,000 clowns, a fitting tribute to a man who dedicated his entire life to bringing joy to others.